How would you categorize the congressional reaction this week to the news that the NSA collected records from telephone companies?
It's been a little all over the place, actually. There seem to be a number of lawmakers who are very concerned about it. There seem to be a fair number of lawmakers who say it's not even as intrusive as the warrantless surveillance program that was revealed by the New York Times late last year. And then there are a group of lawmakers who say that even talking about it is tipping off the terrorists, and they don't actually acknowledge any of the things in the USA Today story that revealed it were legal or illegal.
Now, members of the House and Senate, various of them have said that they were briefed about this program. What were they told by the NSA, and were these the folks that acted as surprised as other members who claim that they were never told about this?
Right. There were a fair number of members who had been briefed and were pretty unwilling to discuss it. Senator Reid yesterday said that he had been briefed, wouldn't really answer questions about it other than to say, when someone asked, "Do you believe it's legal?" he said, "I don't know if it's legal." There were, though, an extensive number of lawmakers, I'd say the vast majority. I think the number of lawmakers who were briefed was very small. Usually the leaders of the parties and the leaders of the intelligence committees on both the House side and the Senate side, Democrat and Republican, who were briefed. But a lot of lawmakers learned about this by reading the newspaper, the same way everyone else did. So Susan Collins is one of the members who said, "We can't keep learning about this from the newspapers." Actually, this sounds like a good program to her. She's a senator from Maine, Republican. She said it sounds like a good program, but she was dismayed that the administration has been keeping these programs secret from the lawmakers.
And as she's also the chair of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, feels that she should have been clued in on this program by the administration or by the NSA?
Exactly. She's been active on intelligence issues, even though she does not chair the intelligence panel. She was one of the people who led the intelligence reform effort that came in the wake of the September 11th Commission recommendations. So she's been active on those issues, and I think she wasn't just speaking for herself, though. I think she was speaking for a fair number of senators and lawmakers who would like to be hearing about this directly from the president before they find out about it in the papers.
One of the headlines in the papers this morning, this one from the Baltimore Sun, Hayden nomination seems safe from NSA spying furor. When he comes up in front of the Intelligence Committee on Thursday, how much of this NSA telephone situation is going to affect the questioning in his nomination hearing?
It's definitely going to affect the questioning. Whether it affects his nomination is a different question. But there are a number of lawmakers on that Senate Intelligence panel, including the ranking Democrat, Senator Rockefeller, who have indicated that they would like to question him about this. There are some who are more dismayed about it than others. Senator Wyden is a member of the committee from Oregon, Democrat, who said, his credibility suffers with me because he's not acknowledged some of these programs under questioning in previous appearances on Capitol Hill. So there are going to be some who approach it from a credibility question for a standpoint. There are going to be some who approach it from the standpoint of whether it's legal and whether it's effective. And there are going to be a lot of people who just want to get information because so few have received it. There will also be a closed hearing that they'll be able to get more questions answered afterwards.
And Senator Feinstein of California says she called it a major constitutional, or that it might create a major constitutional confrontation on Fourth Amendment guarantees against unreasonable search and seizure. Break that down for us.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is that you may not see that debate so much this week during the Hayden nomination. You might actually see that more on the Judiciary panel. Senator Feinstein's a member of both, and there was a Judiciary hearing the day of this news report where she mentioned this. She's actually been pretty supportive of the Hayden nomination. But there does seem to be a gathering storm. I don't know how how much of a storm there's going to be. It certainly is something that a lot of lawmakers are very concerned about. They're concerned about the constitutionality of the program. They're worried that the privacy is being invaded. There are other laws that may or may not have been broken in the eyes of these lawmakers, telecommunications privacy laws, for instance. And that's why the Judiciary Panel Chairman, Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, Republican, has said he'd like to call the phone companies to the Hill to ask them questions. So there's that issue, but there's also the issue of some lawmakers at least wanting to bring these programs that they believe might be illegal out of the shadows and make them compliant with existing law in some way, shape, or form. And I think most of that will happen on the Judiciary Panel.
Tim Starks reports on intelligence issues for Congressional Quarterly and is taking your phone calls for about the next 20-25 minutes. The numbers are there on the screen, 202-737-0002 for Democrats, 737-0001 for Republicans, and 202-628-0205 for Independents. Remember, if you've called within the last 30 days, today would not be the day for you to call. You can also send us emails, journal@c-span.org. Our first call comes from Jackson, Wyoming, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning. Just, it blows my mind. Here's these people that want to stop the flag, have a law against flag burning, while they step on the Constitution. This is illegal. Gonzalez should be arrested for treason, and so should our president. Anybody who even knows about this program. I didn't give anybody permission to have this information on me. I'm an American citizen. I'm a liberal Democrat. This is, we really don't know what this whole program details because there's no oversight. We don't know whether or not they're picking out words in conversations to try and focus on certain people, and then what line does it come? If I call somebody and somebody else calls somebody, does a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend also become a target? The FICA law is supposed to protect us, and is not doing anything, and these people should be prosecuted for going against our constitutional rights. Thank you very much.
Tim Starks.
Well, the complaints about Gonzalez that the caller mentioned, he has testified on Capitol Hill about this program. There has been some concern that in earlier testimony, before any of these surveillance programs were revealed, there had been some concern that he hadn't been full in his disclosure. He had essentially said that everything we do is under the existing law. Now, the administration has maintained that this is a legal program, but there was some question about whether he misled Congress with that testimony. There is the issue of how far the phone records program that was revealed on Thursday goes. Because we have essentially media reports, what happens is that we have to rely on what we know from those media reports so far. There's no evidence that has been revealed yet that this program takes the phone calls of average Americans and listens to them. It is collecting the phone records, examining the call patterns. So the caller raised some good questions.
Our next call comes from Stamford, Connecticut, on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Court Walsh. I'm calling specifically, I guess, about the phone tracking. The number of the senators that were outraged, they're somewhat disingenuous in their comment. Because if you go back to the Carter end of the Clinton administration, these same senators that were outraged cast voice votes for the very program of monitoring telephone numbers only. There's nothing about listening in or recording actual conversations. According to the program, which was part of Echelon, it also is part of Echelon that was introduced during the Clinton administration, that very specifically phone numbers were being watched, not conversations. In fact, if any member of the NSA reveals a content of a phone conversation that reveals a crime that has not been covered by a warrant, those listeners are subject to a 15-year prison sentence without any trial. They violated federal law. So to say that a phone tracking program is intrusive in the U.S., all of the senators, all politicians are more intrusive in their information gathering and data mining and their very fundraising. They can find out more about the American people and their activities and their spending patterns and their telephone use simply by going out and tracking information that's available in virtually any database. So all fundraisers, Democrats and Republicans alike, are far more intrusive than this simple telephone number tracking system that's matching up. It's a preposterous to say that they're outraged because the very senators, Kennedy and the others, had a voice vote in favor of the very program that they're now supposedly outraged about.
You know, the interesting thing about what the caller raised is that there are some counter arguments against the complaints that we've been hearing to the effect that if we weren't doing this, we might be getting criticized. I think, though, if there's a difference in the mind of those who are concerned about this, it might be that this is a spy agency we're talking about. I think Americans tend to be a little uncomfortable with the notion of being spied on by their government. There might be a difference between the collection of phone records or call information for the purposes of political fundraising, which maybe is more insidious, I don't know, but there are some people who I think would be more concerned that a spy agency was collecting information on them than a politician interested in raising money.
Springfield, Massachusetts, you're on with Tim Starks of Congressional Quarterly.
How are you? Yeah, I mean, who's to decide who's an ordinary American citizen? I mean, President Bush is saying that this is not. I mean, this is not going to affect ordinary citizens. I mean, who's an ordinary person? I mean, is President Bush going to tell us like who this is going to affect? I mean, that's what I want to know. And who's like? I mean, anytime our government starts making decisions without telling us about them, this is ridiculous. And just to say that it's for the good of the people, I mean, that's like let us do what you can do whatever you want as long as it's for the good of the people. I mean, that's not a democracy. We're not. I mean, that's not like allowing people to. It's not America. It's ridiculous.
Right. I think what's different about this program that has caused some of the outrage is that they're collecting phone records for anyone, regardless of whether they're a suspect. Previously, the domestic surveillance program that we knew about, that the New York Times revealed, it was that they were spying on people who, or conducting surveillance on people who were suspected of ties to Al-Qaeda. So now we're talking about tens of millions of phone records on Americans who may have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, but what they're doing is they're trying to collect patterns to see if they can maybe ferret out Al-Qaeda suspects. So who is affected is essentially the customers of the phone companies that have allegedly complied with this program. But that is a legitimate question as to whether the federal government should be telling us about what they're doing in terms of spying activities. There are some who support this program, but I don't think that anyone would say that this isn't a broad expansion of legal authority. The administration says Congress gave us that right after September 11th when they passed a resolution saying that the president has the authority to conduct a war on terror in very broad terms. There are some who say that wasn't what Congress intended at all with that resolution, but the administration is interpreting that just about as broadly as you could conceivably interpret it.
Deerfield Beach, Florida, you're on the Washington Journal. Good morning.
Hi, I'm calling in regards to the appointment of General Michael Hayden. I don't know if that's actually something that is legal because the president, doesn't he tell him what to do, more or less, overseas? And isn't the CIA a civil servant position?
I'm not aware of any questions of the legality of his nomination. There is a different question about his civilian status. He is a military general, and there are a number of lawmakers on Capitol Hill who are concerned about that. The intelligence overhaul that was approved by Congress in 2004 said that the military. Part of the debate about that was how much the Department of Defense, what kind of role they should have in intelligence. They'd been expanding, and by most accounts have been expanding since that overhaul was passed. Donald Rumsfeld, the Defense Secretary, rejects that argument, but there are a number of lawmakers who are of the mind that how much do we want to have the Department of Defense involved in this, and to say that General Hayden should resign his four-star generalship, resign from his military service, so that he can be the head of a civilian agency. There have, though, been previously, there have been civilians who have led the agency and military leaders who have led the agency. There was an intelligence authorization law that did not get passed in the Senate that had a provision recommending that a civilian head the CIA, but I'm not aware of any concerns about the legality of it.
There was a story reported in the National Journal's Congress Daily on Thursday, as well as some other publications later in the week, talked about a former intelligence officer for the National Security Agency said Thursday he plans to tell Senate staffers next week that unlawful activity occurred at the agency under the supervision of General Michael Hayden beyond what has been publicly reported, while hinting that it might have involved the illegal use of space-based satellites and systems to spy on U.S. citizens. Russell Tice, who worked on what are now known as special access programs, has wanted to meet in closed session with members of Congress and their staff since President Bush announced in December that he had secretly authorized the NSA to eavesdrop on U.S. citizens without a court order. In an interview late Thursday, Tice said the Senate Armed Services Committee finally asked him to meet next week in a secure facility on Capitol Hill. What kind of effect is this going to have, or will it have, on the confirmation of General Hayden? Does it sidetrack it, or does it put more pressure on him?
It certainly doesn't sound like the kind of thing that would help him. CQ as well had a story on this, and I don't know that anyone has confirmed that he is confirmed outside of his remarks that he is going to be meeting with the Senate Armed Services Committee. I do suspect, though, that this fellow largely has some credibility, or we wouldn't have written about him. Congress Daily wouldn't have written about him. How much credibility is a question, I guess, that the lawmakers will have to ascertain when they meet with him. If they do, I just have to imagine that there would be a lot of lawmakers who would hear these complaints and see these aired publicly and want to know more from him and others like him who are inside the agency who are willing to speak out. It doesn't help. How far it goes towards sidetracking the nomination will depend on how credible his allegations are that General Hayden was aware or not aware of the legality of the program. I think he has claimed. I think Mr. Tice has claimed that General Hayden was aware that this was illegal. I don't know if that quite fits into the way the administration has been interpreting the rules. So we'll have to see more from him. It's an intriguing story.
In addition to reporting on intelligence issues for Congressional Quarterly, Tim Starks also works on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security, and he's been at CQ since August of 2003. Previously, he was a correspondent for the New York Sun and the Indiana State House Bureau Chief for the Evansville, Indiana Courier and Press. Next up is Vista, California, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question for you or for any listener. I have nothing to hide, so therefore they can do this, or they can do whatever they want. And I guess I would like that answered by anybody there. But I'd like somebody else to call in, too, that person who actually has nothing to hide. I'd like to speak to him. Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to Springdale, Arkansas, on our line for Republicans. Have you got anything to hide this morning?
No, I do not.
What's your question for Tim Starks?
Well, my question is that we're having such a debate over these telephone numbers when, in fact, you can go on the web and get any telephone number you want or address. Your bank tells you when you do business with them that they will give to people they do business with, your public information. Your credit cards do the same. I think we need to start talking about more important things. I'm more concerned about agencies who have people who give newspapers information that could really harm us. This is where we need to put our emphasis, and not on telephone numbers that anyone can get.
I think certainly anyone can get just about anyone's phone number. I think the difference here that has prompted some concern is that it's about call records. It's about who you're calling and whether the government should be able to look at that. I think the difference for some people between businesses and the government is that in the case of the businesses, when you go to the bank, you might have a box that you can check that says, I do not want any of my information released to other companies. There are different rules for different kinds of situations, but I think for the most part it's a business relationship that you can enter into or not enter into. For that matter, you don't really have to have a bank if you don't want. However, if the government that is funded by your taxpayer dollars is doing something that you object to, in this case, looking at your phone records, certainly that's something you can complain about. But both callers raised a question of privacy versus other issues. I don't know if the caller, for instance, previous would relish the idea of the government having a camera in his home. So it's a question of how far, and it's a question under what circumstances. They're really at the crux of this debate.
There was a bill introduced on Thursday by Representative Conyers in the Judiciary Committee and Representative Harmon in the Intelligence Committee requiring federal compliance with existing warrant laws. Explain that for me.
Since I've been a little more focused on the Hayden nomination and the intelligence side, I've focused a little less so far this week on the judiciary questions. But there is a general consensus among both Republicans and Democrats that if we don't like these programs, we would at least like them to be compliant with existing law. There's some who would maybe want to shut it down entirely. But there's an effort, as I mentioned earlier, in the Senate Judiciary Panel. There's an effort now with what Congresswoman Harmon and Congressman Conyers are doing that are all of the same notion, which is, under what circumstances are we going to have these programs? If we're going to have them, should they be under the existing law?
It sounds, though, that the Conyers-Harmon bill basically requires you to follow the law of laws that already exist.
Right.
It sounds kind of like a catch-22 or a circular kind of a thing.
Right. It's difficult. It's difficult to see how this will work out. If Congress passes a law saying that all of these programs that some of us already think are illegal, we now want we want to doubly make them illegal. I don't know if anybody can sort that out except for the courts.
And our last call for Tim Starks comes from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have some concerns about all of this, but the thing that I keep coming back to is if you have a child or a spouse or a boss or a friend that lies to you, why would you trust them again? And then if they repeatedly lie to you, why would you keep trusting them? I don't trust the government to be truthful about this. I think that this information can be used for their political opponents, for people who don't agree with them. It can be used for grand jury investigations, and we don't know that they're not recording this stuff just because they say they're not. And I think it's a question also of Gonzalez and Hayden and Bush and Cheney, and all of them took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And the people that are supporting them are overlooking the Constitution and letting fear and party loyalty take precedence over what our Bill of Rights have guaranteed us, and they seem to just give those away with with no thought.
Sorry, ma'am. Tim Starks, you got the last word.
There is a lot of uncomfortableness with the idea of the government spying on its citizens for exactly the reasons that the caller just mentioned. Some people just inherently object to the idea of being watched or having any surveillance conducted of them, even if they're not doing anything wrong. But when it comes to the notion of finding out more about them than they are comfortable with the government knowing, even if they're not doing anything illegal or wrong, using it perhaps to gain political advantage. Those are the things that brought down a presidency, more or less. If you look back at Nixon, spying on the opposite party for political gain. If you were to extend that idea to the notion of the average citizen, I wouldn't be surprised if the president were to go down in flames. But so far, there's no evidence. There may be cause for skepticism, since we weren't aware of either of these programs. It raises very legitimate questions about what else there is. So far, none of those concerns yet have been given any evidence that they might be the case.
Tim Starks, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you.
Just recently, the National Middle School Association put out a report. It's called the Success in the Middle, a Policymaker's Guide to Achieving Quality Middle-Level Education. In just a few minutes, we'll talk with Sue Swaim of the National Middle School Association, and we want to encourage teachers and parents with students in middle school to give us a call. We'll give you the numbers in just a few seconds.
Sunday's television talk shows will focus on reports that the National Security Agency developed a database of millions of domestic phone calls. The database was reported Thursday by USA Today and has been followed since then by reporters for other news organizations. National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley will discuss the collection of these phone records on Face the Nation at CBS. The top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Jane Harman, will also talk about collecting data on domestic phone calls. Senator Arlen Specter is on the program, too. He chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he plans to hold hearings looking at any constitutional questions raised by the databases. On ABC's This Week, Senate Intelligence Committee member Chuck Hagel and Senator Joe Biden will discuss the databases. First Lady Laura Bush will also be on This Week. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich is a guest on NBC's Meet the Press. First Lady Laura Bush will be on Fox News Sunday, as will Mary Cheney, who has written a new book, Now It's My Turn. National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley is on Late Edition at CNN. Other guests are Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was National Security Advisor to former President Carter, Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, and Jordanian Foreign Minister Abdel Ilah Khatib.